It's important we look at the facts.
Why? Why?
Douglas Ross is sounding pretty scared.
I believe in independence.
And he clapped like a seal.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another fun-filled edition of Planet Holyrood. Paul Hutchin, unfortunately, can't be here today. No, he's not at a spa, as he usually usually is when you see me. But he is out actually doing some work. So I am going to be hosting today. And joining me is Anna Burnside, who's the chief writer at the Daily Record, and Douglas Dickie, who's the content editor at Scottish Daily Express. Hello.
Greetings.
Hi, Anna. Hello. So we've got actually quite a lot on the agenda to get through today. Just there seems to be an awful lot of things going on, and it would just be good to sort of get into them and unpack them a bit and just see what you guys think. So we'll just crack on. I think the first thing that I wanted to talk about was Boris Johnson. Obviously has been the star witness today and yesterday at the COVID inquiry, the UK one. And, I think there's been a few interesting things that he said in terms of the Scottish government and the devolved administrations and, the working with them or lack of working with them. One of the things that he was hinting at yesterday was about we weren't communicating with them because they were leaking things from the Cobra meetings. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I can't really remember many of the leaks from devolved governments. It seemed to be mainly from Westminster, but I might be biased because I was working in Westminster at the time. But, do you think that that's an excuse, or do you think that really they just didn't particularly want to work with the devolved governments?
I think it was an excuse. I think you nailed it there. I mean, when I was thinking about this, it's actually quite funny because it's the reverse of what you normally see from the SNP, isn't it? Who blame, their kind of default position on so many things is to blame Westminster. No, it's Westminster's fault. So actually, it's quite funny to see that turned on its head and to see Westminster going, oh, well, it was Scotland's fault. It was the devolved administration did it and ran away. I was just snorting. I was just snorting all the way through at the things he said and the lameness of his appearance at this inquiry that he suggested. The fact that, having suggested it, known it was coming, having had it in his diary, he might have gone to the trouble of actually preparing and being ready to actually make even a half-hearted attempt to do a good job of appearing at it. But no, actually, he's done none of those things. Everything, his appearance, he was what my late mother would have called an awful looking sight. General, look at this. I mean, he does not inspire confidence, does he? And just his general lackadaisical, lazy, lame performance was so unimpressive. I really think Lee Kane nailed it when he said that Johnson had exactly the wrong skill set to deal with this crisis. I mean, it's hard to think of anything, that his skill set would work for. But I think this just reminded everybody, watching him in action, just reminded everybody that his sniggery, kind of naughty schoolboyish style and this slightly defiant, I shook hands with everyone, I'm sure you'll all be pleased to hear that. That was 100% the attitude we did not need during a scary, unfolding, uncertain political situation, which he was so blatantly inadequate to deal with. And I think we knew that at the time. It was clear at the time. And I think with hindsight, it's absolutely crystal clear what a terrible job he did of the whole thing.
Dougie, what do you make of his apologies that he kind of started off with, and of course were briefed? Ironically, they were leaked the day before he was due to appear. But did you believe the apologies that he kind of put up at the start? Or
I'm going to first of all and say I need to disagree slightly. I think leak is the wrong word, but I don't think anyone can doubt that Nicola Sturgeon especially was guilty of rushing to the press to announce things that had been discussed in Cobra meetings. I mean, it's not just Boris who's brought this up. Other government ministers have as well. Leak, I don't know, but it's quite clear that the leader of at least one devolved administration was really keen to get ahead of the narrative from these Cobra meetings. So I think anyone at the time could see, that she was determined to kind of be the first one to announce or to make a lot of these announcements or to communicate a lot of these decisions. But in terms of his apology, I think in many ways, listen, the problem is it didn't actually matter what he said. It doesn't matter how how meaningful or how much anyone thinks he meant it. Minds are completely made up on it. It didn't really, what happened won't change any minds either way.
I think it was interesting that he had, there was clearly some kind of hecklers as well, which, it kind of shows you like there's obviously just such a strong feeling towards him and his government. And, I think probably a lot of that is, yes, the decisions that were made during COVID, but also the personal actions of the Tories at the time with the parties and with, even just some of the, the things that we'd heard about letting it rip through the community and basically, to hell with all the old people and sick people. I think it just kind of, there's just a lot of sort of bad feeling about it. And unfortunately, Boris Johnson is the sort of symbol of that anger and frustration. So
he anticipated that, didn't he, by arriving early? I mean, you get the impression he's never early for anything. He's running in, doing that thing with his hair, at 30 seconds to go. So they clearly anticipated that, and that was a stage managed thing that he was early, so he didn't have to run a gamut of people shouting at him and holding up placards and pictures of their dead loved ones and so on outside. So that was clearly going to happen.
Yeah.
I actually think yesterday was a bit of a damp squib in many ways. I thought he looked quite comfortable up there after an early start. I think today, when we come into Partygate and whatnot, it might be, he
certainly wasn't as snappy as he had been when he was questioned by the Commons earlier in the year, was he? I mean, they really needled him, and he really got very defensive. So it'll be interesting to see if we get a repeat of that behaviour today.
Yeah, I mean, he has been a bit more, just from what I've seen today, he has been a bit more sort of, less calm and measured. He's been a bit more snarky, and I imagine that the front pages of most of today's newspapers might have something to do with it. But okay, I think we're going to have to move on. Just as I said, we've got so much to cover today that I want to make sure we get through it all. So the second thing I wanted to just discuss briefly is tonight we have this emergency meeting of the Holyrood cabinet to talk about the budget and basically what they're going to do. I'm wondering what Anna, maybe you can answer this. Do you think that this is genuinely a real sort of crisis that we've not seen before, or do you think there's any sort of political hands at work here in terms of trying to make it look as if it's worse than it potentially is?
You mean, well, Douglas might have been a better person to ask to lead on that after
maybe actually, Dougie, what do you think?
Yesterday's huge page on a Black Wednesday or whatever you called it, for the SNP. I mean, there's no doubt they're having quite a torrid time at the moment, and they got to find £1 billion somewhere, and that is not money that you find down the back of a sofa. So yeah, I mean, they absolutely have to come up with some kind of credible strategy of how they're going to pay the bills. You know, so yes, they are having a torrid time. I mean, I don't know if I would go as far as to have a 2-page doom and gloom number on it, but yeah, it's not going to be a cheery. It's not going to be a cheery Christmas drinks meeting tonight, is it? You know, they're not going to be having mince pies and mulled wine and, you know, saying, haven't we had a great year? You know, with Michael Matheson sitting there looking sheepish, you know, it's not going to be good.
No. Dougie, what do you think? Do you think that, you know, it is as bad as they're saying, or do you think these meetings are, you know, there's some sort of, I mean, I guess my point is, you know, fair enough to have meetings about a serious financial situation, but it's the fact that they're being so kind of openly publicised as, well, we're having to do this because this evil Westminster government have withheld money from us, etc. You know, I just wonder, like, if that comes into it, if the kind of publicising of the reason behind this, you know, that is that politically motivated, and do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got to say, yeah, I think there is an element of that. I think what's happening here is it's a culmination of years of not having a serious government, and suddenly an unserious government is having to make very serious decisions. And you know, you look at the people that make those decisions. I noticed there was an interview Shona Robertson gave a few weeks ago doing the rounds on social media, in which she seemed to indicate that she had expected that Westminster would stump up extra money for pay deals with public sector workers that the SNP had agreed. And of course, Humza Yousaf trumped everyone with his council tax freeze at the SNP conference, which has turned out to be completely uncosted. So I think in many ways, this is a culmination of that. I think it is a serious situation. I don't think the budget is going to make for very happy reading, but I think ultimately, if the SNP want to be taken serious as a party, then these are the serious decisions that they've got to make. For years, they've made hay with you know, free giveaways, you know, free prescriptions, things like that. But you know, when you're in a serious government, you need to make important decisions that aren't going to please anyone, and of course they're going to be making these decisions at a time where they're, you know, tanking in the polls. So it's a pretty difficult time for them. I understand that they've not ruled out the possibility of a second meeting next week as well. So you know, they might not even get to you know, they might not even thrash it out tonight, as it were. So
yeah, I mean, one thing we are hearing is there's talk of, you know, raising taxes in some way or adding an additional tax band. You know, I'm not entirely sure whereabouts that would fall, but there's only so many ways you can cut the pie if the pie is getting smaller. If that's if you understand what I mean, you know.
I mean, I thought this tax band they're talking about. So what is it, like 70? If you earn between 75 and like 120,000 pounds a year. I mean, I didn't look up the figures for this, but that doesn't strike me as a massive demographic group that are earning in that. I mean, that's way above the national average wage. You know, I don't see that as a huge money spinner. I mean, I don't know if anyone got their calculator out on this, but I don't see that as making much of a dent on, you know, the £1 billion black hole that they've got. I didn't think that was, you know, I could see that as part of a bigger strategy, but I thought, really, that's your solution? I don't. How many people in Scotland are in that pay band? I don't see that as a massive, you know, help.
I think that's, and I think that's a pitch to the people in the party that maybe backed Humza Yousaf. You know, they want.
I get that. You know, it's politically acceptable. You know, it's much more. Obviously, it's more politically acceptable to tax higher earners. Yeah, I mean that's clear. But there's no, you know, make a political pitch to your supporters, but it's not much good if it doesn't actually solve the problem, is it? You know, that it seems a bit. I just thought that was a bit of a mysterious move, personally.
Yeah, I just wonder if that's the sort of, you know, again, that's being put out as a potential solution. Obviously, as you say, Anna, we haven't got the calculations. We haven't calculated exactly how much that could generate. But by the looks of it, it's not going to generate the £1 billion that's
I don't
needed.
see that. Yeah, I mean, of course, it's the kind of thing that would be palatable to the Greens, which obviously is important while the Butte House agreement's standing, all that kind of thing. It makes political sense as far as that goes. It just doesn't, it's just once you get your calculator out, that kind of falls to bits, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it kind of makes me think, well, what, it'll just be interesting to see basically what else they're going to do, because as you say, they can't just do that. But I wonder if that's the sort of being put out as the sort of the headline grabber, so that then there's less focus when all the other little,
snippet cuts.
Yeah, exactly. Come in and they'll say, well, but it's okay because we're actually taxing the rich even more. But yeah, I mean, there's no way really around it. Everyone is skint, and you can say it's 13 years of Westminster Tories or 17 years of SNP, etc. But I think just ultimately everybody's in a pretty dire situation, and a lot of that is probably to do with the pandemic and also Brexit, unfortunately. But yeah, so moving on to another.
With their meeting, yeah. Have a nice time.
Yeah.
Ration out your nat tax. That's what they'll be doing. Working out their nat tax.
Moving on to another thing that 17 years, or is it 17? Yeah, it's 17 years of SNP government. 17 or 16, I can't remember.
Well, it just shows how bad the education system is. If we can't
That's harsh, Dougie.
I include myself in that,
Yeah, and that's a nice segue though. So obviously this came up a lot at the FMQs this afternoon, and it was obviously quite kind of tense, the fact that these PISA scores have come out, and for people who are not familiar with them, it's basically like a international ranking list of how smart kids are in every country. I think they basically measure 15-year-olds on things like math, science, reading, etc. And then every country gets a score based on the assessments. So Scotland's rankings have fallen again. So I think this year is the first time that they've done it since 2018. So since 2018, Scotland's score, I actually wrote this down, so Scotland's score has fallen 18 points in maths, 11 in reading, and 7 in science since 2018. And now Scotland is below the average for the other OECD sort of nations for the first time, albeit it's very, it's not a huge below the average, but it's still slightly below the average. What do you think about this situation? I mean, everyone always points to Nicola Sturgeon's infamous, judge me on my record in education. But what is really going on here? Why are we seeing this? Is it because of the curriculum? Is it because there's a lack of teachers? Is it because pupils are not learning as well? I don't know. Like, what's your theory? What's actually behind it?
Well, I think the first thing I'd say is it doesn't help that we've got a government that thinks 45 is a bigger number than 55. But I'll move on from that. I've been kind of listening to teachers speak on radio shows and whatnot about it, and they're all very, very critical of the curriculum for excellence. I heard one of them call it the curriculum for excrement, which I think is a nickname that's been doing the rounds. They seem to feel that it's too easy. It rewards mediocre work, and maybe we're not pushing the kids hard enough. I think again, schools feel they need to stick rigidly to it, whereas maybe the SNP government should give them more leeway to try different things in different places. See what kind of works with them. I think it's a bit of everything. I think COVID. Humza Yousaf, and again today, First Minister's question brought up COVID. Obviously, it's a global pandemic, and we've fallen down the global league tables. So I don't think we can really use COVID as an excuse. Cuts to teacher numbers, class sizes are still too high. Another big thing that's been in the news is the use of smartphones in school. That's putting kids off. It's distracting kids.
Do you mean like using smartphones not for learning, but having smartphones in schools?
Yeah, because of course they do, and part of the issue is people talk about banning smartphones, but of course they're encouraged to use devices to look up things. So one way to stop that would be, to give children a school-issued iPad, which of course is another SNP policy that they failed to come through on thus far. So I think it's about a combination of everything. Obviously, Scotland has always prided itself in having a really good education system. So to see us fall, not just in the league tables, but behind, the other countries in the UK, or certainly behind England, it's not great. It doesn't look great. And it's another damning verdict on Nicola Sturgeon's time in office. Because, of course, as you say, education was our number one priority. And the other thing I'm getting is that this had been happening before COVID as well. I think the dip had started. I had one teacher say it can absolutely be tracked back to the introduction of the curriculum for excellence. At the same time, the last thing hard-pressed teachers need and hard-pressed students need is a complete revamp of the curriculum. So I don't think there's any, easy answers on it. I'd say Jenny Gilruth really got her work cut out. Whether she's up to the task, I guess time will tell.
Yeah, Anna, what do you think? Do you think that it's time for, a return to the blackboard and eyes forward, no talking?
No, that's never going to happen. I mean, so I've two children who have come through the school system. One is now at university and the other one is now working. So I have, hands-on experience and was there as the curriculum for excellence was being introduced. So I have kind of seen it through. And I can see that the overarching reasons for it are right in that things are changing so quickly within the economy with technology that we do have to equip children to do jobs that we can't currently imagine. I mean, when they started talking about the curriculum for excellence, AI wasn't a thing at all. So I think the overarching concept is not without merit, but I have been very unimpressed with how it's been implemented. My son has he's just in first year at university. So, we've just recently came through the pandemic, did hires and did advanced hires last year. And in some of his subjects, I'm just horrified actually at the way he's been taught, to some extent, how spoon-fed they are, how little independent thought at that level, the independent at advanced higher level. I mean, that should be basically first year university level. I don't think you should be been given essay plans. I've been very unimpressed with how he's been taught. In fact, I wanted to go into school and have a fight with one of his teachers, and I had to be prevented from doing so. You'll be glad to hear. Otherwise, I would have been in the paper for all the wrong reasons. But teachers, I mean, I'm not really being, there's individual teachers who aren't great, but I'm not really being critical of teachers because they have a horrendous job to do in very difficult circumstances. They're demoralised. They don't feel valued. The curriculum for excellence doesn't give them a lot of independence or wriggle room or capacity, to respond to the kids in their class. And I think in general, and one of my takeaways of the PISA figures was with the science and maths, particularly poor results in science and maths, that just fills me with terror, because if you look at all the predictions of where the jobs of the future are going to be in the Scottish economy, most of them require STEM skills, decarbonize, a full range of them, the whole decarbonisation, green transformation of the energy sector, biotechnology, even gaming. So that's just 3 of the sectors that we are told are, strong and flourishing and going to be the Scotland of the future and all that blah de blah. You can't work on any of them if you don't have a good grounding in maths and science. Yet you can't do higher physics in a lot of secondary schools in Scotland. I mean, I mean, I'm so old, obviously, when I was at school, it was very different. So I'm constantly sounding like an ancient person, shaking their fist at the moon when people tell me things like, oh no, if you want to do higher physics, you have to be bused to another school. So it really doesn't fill you. It really doesn't fill you with faith at all. And it doesn't. The science and maths thing really makes me think that there isn't a joined up thinking between, yes, we have to prepare kids for the jobs of the future. That's the abstract idea. But actually that means building a really strong science and tech sector. And I don't see that in schools. I think it's very hard for kids to excel in those subjects. Actually, it's not made easy for them to pursue. And if you don't go to one of the few schools that offer these subjects, you're very unlikely to be able to pursue them without putting in a lot of personal effort and your family helping you out and all the things that are immediate barriers to anyone from a situation where that, where their family can help them with that kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly. Well, I think we've kind of covered that issue pretty well. I think we've actually, it's interesting to hear, Anna, your experience, because obviously as a parent of kids who have kind of just gone through that, it's really interesting to hear. And certainly, I don't know, it'd be interesting to go back into a school now and try and do the exams and things that they do compared to what we used to do, because I'm pretty sure it would be very different. But
well, I mean, my attempts to help my son with his higher politics were very interesting. Although, finally, he's impressed that I knew things like how the D'Hondt system worked. So, there were some upsides to it.
Yeah, so the last thing we're going to come on to talk about is just this week we've seen the Scottish Government publish a new kind of policy paper on what social security would look like in an independent Scotland. And we have seen these, there's been a couple of these now. I don't necessarily, well, we can, if you have anything particular to say about the actual policy paper itself, but I think that one of the big criticisms of all of these things is, civil servants being taken away from other things to work on this. What about things like education, the NHS, the amount of money that's being spent on these papers when, some people see it as a sort of more just using the civil servant service as sort of propaganda tools. Dougie, I don't know what your opinion is on that, or just on the paper itself. I mean, I don't know if you've spent much time studying it.
Yeah, well, the first thing I'd say is there's been more than a couple of them. There's been quite a few of them now, and yeah, the major issue a lot of our readers have is kind of the money being spent on them. I mean, this latest one, I won't go through it in detail, but I think and I include myself in this, but I think it's time we started treating these as a joke. They are, because that is, they are a joke. It's not. Again, I come back to the SNP not being a serious party. This isn't serious politics. It's just nonsense. It's just red meat for independent supporters who might be losing faith in the project, and it's using our money, our taxpayers' money to do that. I mean,
do you really think it is a joke? I mean,
yeah,
some people would say that we as electorate have voted in a party whose main aim is independence. Therefore, it's right that people should know what Scotland would look like in an independent situation.
But there is no, the Scottish Government doesn't have the power to enact that. Now, it isn't just the fact they're doing it, I find a joke. I mean, their actual content is just, I mean, imagine spending all this money and this is the best you can come up with. The UK government's going to keep paying your benefits for 5 years. I mean, it's just nonsense. And this latest one was really, I thought it was really read like party propaganda, because if you were even to indulge Humza Yousaf for a second and say, there's going to be an independence referendum next year, this time next year, that's 2025. You use the SNP's own timeline of 2 years to become independent, which they had, back in 2014. you know, we're talking about 2027, and you've got the government saying, "Oh, this government will do this," and in independent Scotland, this government will do that. I mean, that just sounds like a party political broadcast. It's something that really irks a lot of people. It's not hard to see why, and it's not aimed at your average voter. It's aimed at SNP supporters who might feel, you know, that their momentum is slowing down.
Anna, what do you think? Do you think that, you know, they should be able to do these
I
things?
agree.
Or
I think you know the potential, you know, the other side of the defence argument that you posited there. I do think that's pretty weak. You know, it's not within their power to deliver independence as a government. So really, they've no business getting their civil servants spending a lot of time and energy on this. And even, you know, you don't even need your calculator out to pick holes in it, do they? I mean, thinking that scrapping Trident is going to pay for a universal basic income, you know, the cost of scrapping Trident would be immense. You know, look at the cost of scrapping HS2. You know, you can't just get rid of something that's like a major infrastructure, huge facility like that with zero cost. It's massively expensive. It would be mind-blowingly expensive to decommission all of that, and that's without taking into account the economic impact of you know, closing the base in Helensburgh and all the rest of it. So I really thought it was Alice in Wonderland numbers, and a bit of a stupid, you know, vanity project. I mean, the idea that you would do that in 5 years is also absolutely laughable. I mean, look at how long it took to put trams into Edinburgh, you know.
Or build some ferries.
Well, exactly. So, yeah, it's a bit of actually, I think it's a bit of a tiresome diversion and a bit tone deaf, given, especially in the week of these PISA figures, and people are looking at their kids doing their homework, you know, and going, come on, really? Servants are doing what? Yeah, it's not impressive on any level. The document itself, I found very unimpressive, and actually doing it, I think shows a deep failure to read the room.
And I think as well, it's hard to see how something like that, which I think has been accepted as not particularly well costed, there are a lot of holes in there. You know, it's hard to see how something like that may convince voters who are undecided to vote for independence.
Well, I do the opposite, because it reminds voters of actually what a hugely complex, a difficult and expensive project independence would be, and how interconnected we are with the mechanics of the UK state. You know, it was I mean, a big deal breaker for a lot of people in the independence referendum was pensions. You know, that was the killer issue for a lot of people. That was, you know, a lot of old people who might have been swithering thought, what's going to happen to my pension? And I know that was one of the, you know, scare tactics, if you want to frame it like that, used by the, you know, the case for the union. But actually, with good point, you know, what about everybody's benefits? If you're living on your benefits, or they're a massive part of your income, of course you're going to want to ask some really hard questions about what is going to happen to them. And if then someone tells you, oh, within 5 years we'll have a lovely system set up and it's going to be great and it's going to be this and it's going to be that, and then you've got experience where you know you can't get anything to happen and you can't get anyone to answer the phone, and you know the system as you have it doesn't work properly, you're going to go like, really? You know, it does not ring true. It's not convincing.
Well, on that note, I think we will finish up the week by our usual good week, bad week. Dougie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I'll be very brief. For bad week, I've picked Scottish pubs. New data this week suggested that pubs in Scotland were closing at twice the rate of that they were in England. they're calling on the Scottish Beer and Pub Association, the Scottish Licensed Trade Association are calling on the SNP government to follow the lead of the UK government in terms of rates relief. And I think, for me, part of the issue, pubs aren't just a place where people go to get drunk. They're really important to many communities. They're important places for tackling loneliness. And I think the Scottish government needs to do more to protect that sector. In terms of Good Week, I've went for David Hamilton, who is the Scottish Information Commissioner, who was vindicated in a court battle yesterday. Another defeat for the SNP government, who wanted to stop the publication of documents relating to the probe into whether Nicola Sturgeon misled Parliament or broke the ministerial code in relation to the Alex Salmond allegations. Another humiliation, really, for the government in a court of law. That's quite a few so far. They're probably getting used to it by now, but a good day for David.
Anna, what have you gone for?
I've gone for Good Week. Westminster Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick, who has resigned over the frankly ludicrous Rwanda plans. Really a plan that the more you look at the small print, the more absolutely unbelievable it becomes. It's one of the most ill-conceived, just frankly bonkers pieces of legislation that have crossed our paths. And he has had the good sense to realise that it's unworkable and ridiculous, and has bowed out. So good for him. Go you, Robert. And Bad Week, I've chosen Hugh Grant, who is that the cost of living crisis is even affecting film stars, because he has told us, made it clear that he did not want to be humiliated by playing an Oompa Loompa in a terrible green wig in the new Willy Wonka film, but has hundreds of wains to feed and needs the money. So, I mean, that's the extent of the cost of living crisis. Hugh's got to wear a purple coat and a green wig and be an Oompa Loompa. That's bad.
Well, yeah, I'll admit, I'm a big Hugh Grant fan, so he could wear...
You?
The wig is fine.
Oh, really? You're loving the wig?
Yep, wow. Loving the wig.
Hugh's children thank you for that.
Yeah, I'll make sure to book 2 tickets to see. I'll go and see it twice, boost up his ratings a bit.
You do that, those diptyque candles or whatever Hugh Grant's children get for Christmas, don't give themselves away.
Exactly. Well, on that note, thank you everyone for joining us for another week of Planet Holyrood, and yeah, we'll see you next week.
It's important we look at the facts.
Why?
Douglas Ross is sounding pretty scared.
I believe in independence.
And he clapped like a seal.